Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Welcome to those of you who are just visiting us for perhaps the first time, and so grateful to have the rest of you here. I will remind you once again, we have passed that 1,000 subscriber threshold, and so now we're in that monetization thing. And there are settings on YouTube's to minimize or capitalize, make ads skippable, which I'm a big proponent of because I'm not into ads. I hate them. And they're now YouTube, ever since they've started operating or offering their subscription, very expensive, by the way, the ads have gotten seriously out of hand. But I want to know from you, because the point of this channel isn't to be a profit center. I wish that's the way it was with Buddhism, so that we could all benefit from our samsaric realities. Certainly, spiritually, internally, life experience-wise, Buddhism is the answer and provides us a quality of life far beyond what we could experience in samsara. But the point is, we're here to be a sangha and to share our study and our history. I, for example, have been immersed in the study of, I would say, Asian, but Buddhism more broadly, since I was a young child. My father was a judoka, and so I was raised around the martial arts. And as you know, in the martial arts, if you practice holistically the martial arts, not as a sport, everything's a sport in the United States. I was raised in Canada. It was, judo was brought from Japan to the West in Montreal, where I grew up, and a faction split off from that, went down to the Americas, down to Brazil. And this is where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu comes from, yes? Judo, as you may or may not know, has its roots in Jiu-Jitsu. And Jiu-Jitsu, real ancient Jiu-Jitsu, is a very intense martial art. But in the practice of martial arts, there's always a discipline of mind, right? And if you're not into the martial arts, or if you've only been into it sport-wise or after school kind of thing, you may not be very aware of that. But the martial arts is an intense... there are two ways to learn martial arts. The physical leading to the spiritual enlightenment, and the internal spiritual knowing of the mind leading to the relationship of the physical. Soft, hard, all of these dichotomies in martial arts. The reason I bring it up is because very early in my life, I remember thinking and being instructed in Taoism, Qigong. I know I'm jumping, China, Japan here, but this was the nature of my young life. And Buddhism, different sects, different ideas of Buddhism, different schools. So it was very early in my development. Also realized that Montreal is an ancient city, uh, over 800 years old, and the idea of the transplant of the French to Nouvelle France, New France, which was then the name of Canada, certainly Quebec, was to transplant the seat of Roman Catholic religion from Europe to the North American continent. And that is to say, very Roman Catholic area, very old school Roman Catholic area. So for me to be exposed to all of this Asian or Eastern thinking very young is indicative of not only my lifetime, but the developments in that area. Point being is that I went to catechism school in the midst of all of this. So my mother, still to this day, extremely Catholic, insanely Catholic. Doesn't go to church, doesn't do any of that, but the mindset, yes? Hector, my father, not so much, right? So very early, before maybe when I can maybe remember around age 9, just being riddled with the nonsense of Christianity and Catholic thinking that just didn't make any sense. So very early on, I was enamored with, gravitated to, looked at the world through Taoism, Buddhism, Qigong, what have you. And that's what interested me in books as well, in study. And so I developed very early on an affinity for thinking rationally, reasonably, and that took me into the sciences and engineering and so on and so forth. And that's my career path as it develops through my life. So when I say I have over 40 years experience studying and practicing Buddhism, I could easily say I have 60 years of exposure and study, but those early years weren't so focused on Buddhism. They were more general, right? So anyway, that's what that life experience as it moves into Buddhism is what I'm trying to bring to the table here. So that's by nature non-sectarian, yeah? As far as scholarship, I definitely, for well over 40 years, have respected Shakyamuni's teaching through its successive scholarly bodhisattvas, if you will, the lineage of Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, and many, many, many names, through to Tendai, Dengyo, Saicho, Malo, and obviously Nichiren. Nichiren being our modern day, our epoch, our situational mentor, our modern teacher, our modern, I like mentor better. As you know, I believe that we teach ourselves. Yeah? All right. Enough blah, blah, blah. I hope I didn't get too convoluted there. There was something essential I was going to point out. Anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in this self-education, yeah? Your practice is what this is all about. My practice, your practice, our practice of constantly instantiating our wisdom, our Buddha wisdom, about this samsaric life, maximizing our experience moment to moment. Yeah? So I will let that serve as the introduction to chapter 11 of the Vimalakirti Sutra. Actions of the Bodhisattva. I'm curious to read this one. It's been a long time since I last read this sutra, so it's nice to go back to it. It's really, it's kicking my butt in many ways. At that time, the Buddha was in the Amara Gardens preaching the law when the ground suddenly became broad and beautifully adorned, and all the persons assembled there took on a golden color. And visually, I'm thinking of those occasional sunsets where the air looks like it's tinted in a color. You know what I'm talking about? Ananda says to the Buddha, "World-honored one, what is the reason for this auspicious sign? The area has become suddenly broadened and adorned, and the members of the assembly have all taken on a golden color." The Buddha said to Ananda, "Vimalakirti and Manjushri, reverently surrounded by a great gathering of persons, have decided to come here. Therefore, this auspicious sign has first of all appeared." This reminds me, I once took a trek up the western coast with my girlfriend, who was 1/8 or 1/16 Makah Indian, and we drove up to spread her mother's ashes at the only remaining settlement of Makah Indians up in near Cape Flattery, I think it is, on the very tip of the Washington state. What was it called? Nea Bay. It was a very auspicious trip, mostly by our arrival at Nea Bay. There was a sense in the air. There was more bald eagles than I'd ever seen, watching them fish right in front of me. It just was such an amazing trip. Met the matriarch of the tribe, very elderly lady, taught me how to do some of the dancing, the ritual dancing to a beat. Just in so many ways, amazing. But there was a time in that trip where we had stayed at a roadside motel, and it was a little bit off of the Puget Sound in a large inlet, and there was a sandy beach, and the sun was going down, and the water, the air, the sand, for about, it felt like an hour, but it might have been less. And I tried to photograph it, but photographs being what they are, there was this shimmering golden hue. You could almost, it's like you wanted to pick it up in the sand. It was so, it was like it was tangibly a layer of gold. It was so golden that it was otherworldly. And all I could do was sit there and look at it in the sky, on the water, on the sand, quixotically, because it just seemed too real. It was a very, very profound moments. And I'm, still, obviously, I never forget it. And so I'm reminded of that as I read this. Anyway, moving on. At that moment, Vimalakirti said to Manjushri, "Let us go together to see the Buddha and join the Bodhisattvas in paying obeisance and making offerings." So this is another mental exercise, yes? We had the one in the last chapter where we went to fragrance universe or world, yes? And now we're in this, let's go visit Shakyamuni, kind of a little bit more contemporaneous world, right? But again, this is a mental exercise. Let's bring our minds to an audience with Buddhaness, is what this is talking about, yeah? Manjushri says, excellent. We will go indeed. This is just the time to do so. Now that we've all learned this lesson, that Buddhaness is inexhaustible, albeit in the form of fragrant rice, right? Now that we get that, let's go visit that. Vimalakirti, employing his supernatural powers, proceeded to pick up the whole great assembly, along with their lion seats, place them in the palm of his right hand, and journey with them to the place where the Buddha was. We know that that's a mental exercise, that it's a story about influence and inclusion, right? None of you believe that he actually whisked everybody into the palm of his hand, do you? Come on. After arriving there and depositing them on the ground, in other words, moving their minds to a realization, he bowed his head at the feet of the Buddha, circled to the right, performing 7 circumambulations of the Buddha, and pressing his palms together with a single mind, stood to one side. Now, I'll remind you, pressing his palms together is not this. If you notice, your palms are really having a hard time touching there. This is something else. This, and if you read enough Buddhist texts, you will find that the bodhisattvas, the followers of Buddha, pressed their palms together and folded their hands. This is what they're talking about. This is an intertwining of samsara and Buddhaness, isn't it? This is mind and body. This is a plea. Some try to say that this is expectation. Okay, if you want to do that. But really, it's pressing the palms together and folding the hands. There's a connection that's happening there that's intimate. You can feel your fingers transmitting left to right, right to left when you fold your hands. But I know that's a tough one, because in the West, what is that? Right? All right. The bodhisattvas all immediately left their seats, bowed their heads at the Buddha's feet, performed 7 circumambulations, and stood to one side. Now, you remember this gathering took the shape of more than 9 million bodhisattvas. This is quite a gathering. But we're not talking about the physical world here. We're talking about, in terms of the physical world, using the words of the physical world, but we're talking about minds. We're talking about mental influence. We're talking about itai doshin, like-minded minds, yeah? The major disciples, Brahmas, Indras, 4 heavenly kings, all likewise left their seats, bowed their heads at the Buddha's feet, and stood to one side. Everyone took the position of honoring Buddhaness as the single focus and object of their practice. That's what all this bowing, circumambulation, it is the acceptance, the commitment, the honorific respect, dignity to this ultimate state of being. Yeah? Then the Buddha, After making the customary greetings and inquiries, set them back to their seats. Please, please. Thank you. Thank you for honoring Buddhaness. Now, relax and let's go there, right? After all of them, following his instructions, had settled again back into their seats, the Buddha says to Shariputra, our good old buddy Shariputra, did you see what all these bodhisattvas, these great men, did through their freely exercised supernatural power? Think about that for a moment. Supernatural powers. When these English words are used to encapsulate the Buddhist thinking, they're not talking about put on a little cape and fly in the air, do things that are non-human. Supernatural powers in Buddhism is the power of our minds, the depth of our perception. Yes, I saw it, Shariputra says. Hell, I'm a Sharvaka. That's all I see. And what did you think of it, Shariputra? World-honored one, what I saw them do was incredible. My mind cannot comprehend it. It is beyond my fathoming. So the nature of that commitment of millions of minds to offer the dignity and, what's the word I was using yesterday? This profound respect for a mindset that everyone has. It's not to this person, Shakyamuni, it's to this enlightenment, this door of the mind that allows us to experience all aspects of life without feeling the need, the requisite to really kill it off, to permanentize it, to own it. We don't own life, we are life, moment to moment. How much more amazing is it to live in that than to run around trying to grab all the scraps? You're not even participating anymore. This is always the point. At that time, Ananda said to the Buddha, world-honored one, this fragrance I smell is like nothing I've ever known. What fragrance is this? Again, back to the senses, yeah? The Buddha replies to Ananda, this is the fragrance that comes from the pores of these bodhisattvas. This constant cycling through spiritual awareness, the mind, its experience, and the fact that the mind and the experience can only emerge from this physical apparatus, this physical form. They're always intertwined. One cannot be without the other. Where does it come from? This fragrance comes from the pores of these bodhisattvas. Then Shariputra says to Ananda, I know. This is the fragrance that comes from the pores of these bodhisattvas. Our pores, too, put forth this fragrance. It's not just them. You smell it, but it's not because it's outside of you. It's part of you, too. Interesting. Buddhaness. It's in all of us. Just because you perceive it outside yourself, that does not mean that that's not you as well. See, that's that duality problem again, yeah? Where does it come from? Asked Ananda. Okay, so it's in all of us and it's coming out of our pores, but there must be a source. Got to be something else, other. It comes from the rice left over from the Buddha's meal that the rich man Vimalakirti had brought from the country many fragrances, replied Shariputra. He's such a good student. He could tell you every lesson. He remembers them all. Unfortunately, that's what sticks him, because that becomes his belief in enlightenment comes from not him reaching it, but him knowing all about it. That's the problem with Shravaka. That's what cuts them off from Buddha. Ironically, the pores of everyone who ate it, this rice, at his house emit this kind of fragrance. And then Ananda says to Vimalakirti, how long will this fragrant aroma last? That question comes from a fundamental misunderstanding that this aroma is a state of mind, not something that wears out or that you find. It's something that you become aware of. This is our process of enlightenment, yes? Let's move on. Vimalakirti said, until the rice is digested. Okay, that's very earthbound answer. Makes sense. Let's move on. And how long will it take before the rice is digested? Oh my God, this interlocution. Again, as we see always in these dialogues in Buddhism, this attention to minutia and the fascination with words and duality. It's like when I'm asked, is 20 minutes of Daimoku enough? Is an hour enough? What more important and the better question is, what should my attitude be? If I spend all day chanting, but I'm making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and whatever else, and I'm just making a sound, as opposed to just an hour of focused, determined, awaken my Gohansan of Buddha. Yeah, that's much more powerful than just droning on all day long. But that's the practice, isn't it? Why compare and contrast? There is only one practice. Make up your mind, be resolved, and do it. Does it matter if you do it for 10 minutes or 10 hours? Well, it depends on your karma. It depends on your challenge and how powerfully you want to instantiate Buddha. If you chant with the resolve and the commitment to instantiate Buddha, there will come a moment in your practice where time will be irrelevant. I can tell you that from my own experience, because it takes very little time for me to forget about time. When I'm in front of my mandala doing gongyo, chanting, especially chanting. Gongyo is kind of a marking of time because there's all these different terms and the song requires a certain amount of time, yeah? But a repetition of the Daimoku is like the fuel. It doesn't know the pistons. It doesn't know the engine. It just knows direct experience. And some days it may take a while. Other days I'm in it. And then I'm doing it until I don't, like I'm full. Like I don't feel I'm adding to it anymore. In fact, I kind of want to just go silent for a moment and be there, be in it. Those are the most amazing moments, yes? Time. Time is a samsaric preoccupation. The power of this rice is such that it will be 7 days before it is digested. Okay, we'll put a hard stop on it. Moreover, Ananda, if voice hearers who have not yet reached the stage of ultimate determination eat this rice, they will be able to digest it only after they have reached that stage. So now the fragrance starts to be the impetus to reach for. What he's saying to Shariputra, the voice hearer, the Shravaka, you haven't reached that stage of enlightenment yet where your actual experience is happening. So Vimalakirti is taking this opportunity of the analogy of the fragrant rice and saying, you've just experienced for the first time this instantiation of enlightenment. How long will that influence, that realization, pervade your experience in samsara? Well, for most of us who are familiar with instantiating that experience, right, our practice, it will take us to the next moment of our practice. And since it stays with us, when we do it daily, we just keep re-enlivening it. But you, Shariputra, you haven't reached that stage yet. You've only touched it. And so that impetus to reconnect with it will stay with you as long as it takes. In other words, this is a different analogy for the seed of Buddha, the Buddhahood. We hear that all the time. Plant the seed of Buddhahood. Share with somebody how to pronounce the terms Namu and Myoho Renge Kyo, the ultimate teaching, the law of enlightenment. Say it, do it. Come over to my place. We'll do it for a few minutes and see how you feel. We can talk about it. Planting the seeds, the time of sowing and harvest. All of those analogies, yeah? It's about this state of mind. We do it ourselves. Every time we invoke Buddha, Buddhaness, we're sowing and reaping, sowing and harvesting, yeah? They will be able to digest it only after they reach that stage where you actually understand your experience of enlightenment. And if persons who have already reached that stage eat this rice, they will be able to digest it only after they have gained liberation of mind. Buddhaness, Buddhahood. If those who have not yet set their minds on attaining the great vehicle eat this rice, they will have to set their minds on that before they can digest it. How many ways can we say the same thing? If those who have already set their minds on doing so eat this rice, they will have to accept the truth of birthlessness before they can digest it. In other words, your process of experiencing enlightenment never ends. Because the end of the process, the end of the digestion, means fully inculcating the wisdom that comes with it. What do you do when you digest your food? You use it as fuel for your existence. You could say, well, it's for the body. Yeah, it's for the body. Why do you want the body to hang around? So that you can experience this mind. Because when there's no body, there ain't no mind. It's really simple. If those who have already accepted the truth of birthlessness eat this rice, they will have to advance to the place where Buddhahood is assured them in their next moment, their next birth, death. before they can digest it. It's like the medicine called superior flavor that remains undigested until all the poisons in the body of the person who have taken it are eliminated. Okay? This rice is the same, only after all the poisons of earthly desires have been wiped out, will it be digested. He's saying the same thing again. When you reach enlightenment, when you open your Gohonzon, we know this because of Lotus Sutra, and you experience the totality of life, you emancipate yourself, you liberate yourself from this constant craving and grabbing at stuff, because you're not getting anywhere, and you start to live that life, right? Then all of the greed, the avarice, the attachments, the poisons of the lower realms, they cease to have any hold on you. You are now living fully. Ananda says to the Buddha, I've never heard of such a thing, world-honored one. To think that this fragrant rice can be used to do the Buddha's work, stop calling it fragrant rice. It's the teaching. It's the awareness of what the teaching means. And once again, we get back to forget the words and look at the meaning. It's not about the rice. It's not about the fragrance. It's about the experience, the knowledge, the Buddha wisdom, the opening door. The Buddha said, just so, Ananda. And there are some Buddha lands where the radiant light of the Buddha is used to do the Buddha's work. Some where the bodhisattvas are used to do the Buddha's work. Some where phantom beings conjured up by the Buddha are used for the Buddha's work. Isn't that what he did with Vimalakirti when he conjured up the phantom bodhisattva? Some where the Bodhi tree is used for the Buddha's work. We all samsarically need these stories and anchors, expedient means, in order to avail us to this new, complete, perfect experience. But we're samsaric beings, so we need to have a path. The path is our samsaric physical existence and our mind of experiencing it, so that we get to a place in mind that doesn't need a path anymore. The path is provisional. The path is all the sutras before the Lotus Sutra. The path is our learning that. And it's individual, isn't it? Some where the Buddha's garments or bedding are used for the Buddha's work. Some where the Buddha's food is used for the Buddha's work. Fragrant rice. Some where gardens, groves, pavilions, and towers are used to do the Buddha's work. Build a stupa. Build a Butsudan. Butsudan is an adaptation of a stupa. Some where the 32 features and 80 characteristics, auspicious marks, and that accompany the body of the Buddha are used to do the Buddha's work. This physical realm, yeah? Some where the Buddha's body is used for the Buddha's work, and some where the empty space is used for the Buddha's work. Living beings responding to these various agents are thereby led to undertaking the practice of the precepts, the mind states. There are lands where similes such as dreams, phantoms, reflections, echoes, images in a mirror, the moon in the water, or shimmering heat waves are used to do the Buddha's work. He's talking about all the expedient means, How many ways can you construct a path of understanding, of insights, of enlightenment to finally get to the prize? Buddhahood, awareness. There are some where voices, spoken words, or written words are used to do the Buddha's work. Or pure Buddha lands, where tranquil silence without words, without explanations, without purport, without cognition, without action, without conditioning, does the Buddha's work. My little story about the beachhead at the motel up in Washington, in that golden light, I'll never forget it. That helped me open my mind to something transcendent. Doing the Buddha's work, yeah? Thus, Ananda, among all daily activities of the Buddhas, their comings and goings, their every act that they carry out, there is not one that does not do the Buddha's work. The universe, yeah? Everything going on moment to moment. Momentum carries us to the realization of the momentum. It's really, they talk about Buddhism being a circular practice. The reasoning, the experience of comes from that circular logic, that inevitable point at center of any circle, yeah? Ananda, there is a gate known as the Four Devils and the 84,000 earthly desires. Living beings are wearied and belabored by these devils and desires. But the Buddhas use this as a method by which to do the Buddha's work. Isn't that what we do? We realize our attachments so that we can reevaluate what they actually are and liberate ourselves from them. We no longer need to be possessed by them. See, we trick ourselves. We think we have possessions, but the truth is all of the things that we think we possess actually possess us. We flip the script. When we understand this, that liberates us, Buddhaness. Again, there's that circular thing again, yeah? This is called the Dharma gate of entry to all Buddhas. Bodhisattvas who've entered this gate, when they see Buddha lands replete with all manner of purity and beauty, will not, for that reason, feel delight or longing or elation. And when they see Buddha lands with all sorts of impurities, they will not feel sad or vexed or downcast, because they understand the nature of all of it. We understand. They will merely regard the Buddhas with renewed purity of mind, experiencing a joy and reverence they have never known before. The merits of the various Buddhas and thus come ones are all equal, but in order to convert living beings, they manifest themselves in different kinds of Buddha lands. So, there's a double-edged teaching there, and I'm going to pause there until the next podcast. It's important to understand the use of the word Buddha lands, because if you didn't notice it, most of the time when we read about the Buddha lands, we're talking about this land of tranquil light, right? Where everything is amazing. But hopefully, while you're paying attention, this Buddha lands, all sorts of Buddha lands, isn't just about fragrant rice or tranquil light. It's about this defiled world. This is our Buddha lands. But look at all the war and hate and violence. And yeah, there's beauty, but we don't seem to talk about that much. What a tragedy that is. Because there's amazing, beautiful, mind-boggling stuff going on in the world today. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, yeah? But for whatever reason, our lower realms are much more attuned. Our monkeys are much more wired in to spectacle. And spectacle very often, if not always, takes the form of shock, violence, ugliness, weariness, as he just said, like climate change. Are you weary of hearing that term and knowing that nothing's being done about it? Well, stuff is being done about it, but it doesn't get much press. But back to the point, this is our Buddha land. In all of that reality, that experience, negative as it may seem, is enlightenment. It is a Buddha land. It just happens to be a Buddha land that requires of you and I a commitment to overshadow it. A commitment profound, strong enough to obliterate. And I don't mean in a negative way, obliterate, but to vanquish, better word, those negative tones, karma, and rather see all of it as a moment-to-moment instantiation of potentials that has its own reality, but doesn't touch us, doesn't touch our Buddhaness. And by removing it from our influence, we can minimize it and affect it to be minimized, to actually change to life affirmation. This is our challenge, yeah? And on that note, keep your practice strong. Redouble your efforts if you have to, right? Always. There's always more in you than you give yourself credit for. Because samsara, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your practice, liking, subscribing, that whole engine that we're working with to distribute more effectively these teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, Nichiren's enlightenment of Shakyamuni teachings. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for your subscriptions to belonging to our Sangha. And most of all, keep your practice strong. And to do that, you need to be mindful of your health, yeah? So be kind to yourself. It's important. You are an integral part. You are very much needed for these Buddha lands, yeah? All right. I'll see you in the next one. Promise. All right. Bye for now.